Hello, today is August 18th, 2009. We're meeting today with Mr. Harold Glass at his home in Fort Collins, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Harold, and thanks for participating today.
Welcome to you, and I'm glad to meet you, glad to know you.
Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
All right, I was born February 11, 1922, in a little town called Peekham, Oklahoma. It was, and when I was born, there was, of course, no question then, but later on, when I went to retire, I had to have a birth certificate. So I asked how I was to get that, and they said you'd have to write to the Bureau of Vital Statistics in Oklahoma City, and they'll have it on file. Sure enough, they did. And when I got it, it said the child's name was unknown, which was not unusual in them days and times. So then it was up to me to find somebody that could witness or had heard of the event. And I found that fellow and got it took care of. And I got my birth certificate, so incidentally I could retire at CSU. But anyway, I had one sister and four brothers, four of us boys.
Where were you in that order?
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle, okay.
Right in the middle, yeah. And we grew up on a farm there in Oklahoma, but we left there in 1929 and went up to Newton, Kansas on our way to Colorado, because Dad had a sister and a brother-in-law lived at Pagosa Springs, Colorado, and that's where we were headed. But we stayed all night with another sister and brother-in-law there in Newton, Kansas, out on the farm. Lo and behold, we wound up staying there 18 years.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, finally, I was 18. When I left home, I told Dad it's a time for me. My mother had passed away when, she was quite young. She was 52 when she passed away with cancer. And I told Dad, I think it's time for me to get out and see what's going on in the rest of this world. So I left, never to go back to live there anymore. I've been back several times, but just visiting. So I adopted Colorado as my home. I lived in Durango at the time. And when I come to Colorado, I moved to Durango.
And this was after you graduated from high school?
I never went to high school.
Oh, is that right?
Dad had us boys, and he was always a poor fellow. He was from Missouri. Never had too many nickels of his own, but he thought he needed us kids on the farm to help him make a living. And we did. And one by one we left. I was the last one to leave. But in the meantime, Dad, he had his house got burnt down. I come home on a Monday morning from the service, and his house had burnt down the Friday night before. But my older brother, one of them, and his wife was living with Dad at the place, and nobody was hurt in the fire. But we used to have an Aladdin lamp, and it had just like a lantern, it had the mandrels on it. And they figured that maybe he had left that light sitting on the table when he went to town in the afternoon, so he'd have light when he come home at night. And the only thing they could figure, that lamp exploded. And his house was ashes in about a little bit.
Wow.
Pretty shocking thing for him. Not so much me, I hadn't been living there, but
Yeah.
it was a terrible loss.
Yeah.
And I went ahead and went over to Durango and went to work in the U.S. vanadium steel mill there, where they turned vanadium ore into high strength steel. And I worked there until Uncle Sam got me by the shirt collar and took me away from him.
Well, now what brought you to Durango?
Well, my uncle and aunt.
Oh,
lived
okay,
there.
okay, so the aunt and uncle that you were going to initially you were heading towards?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I was living with them when it happened. And I got drafted. In the meantime, several little things happened, like getting married, because I wanted to have this wife when I come home, you know. That's not a very good thing for a young man to do.
Yeah.
Going off. I had a son that was 18 months old when I first saw him.
Oh, boy.
Pretty good sized young man.
Uh,
I'm very, very proud of him today. He just had a birthday yesterday. He's 65 years old. And altogether I had 7 children, wife and I did, and had 4 girls and 3 boys. All of them are still alive, all of them doing well, all of them seem to be happy with each other. One of them lives in Wasilla, Alaska. One lives in Pueblo West. One in Denver. And the girls and one boy all live up here. So I get to see family quite often.
oh, good, good.
Get to see, and it's kind of nice.
So you were drafted. Had Pearl Harbor been bombed, or were you part
No.
of? You were part of the pre-war draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was no, it wasn't pre-war. It was Pearl Harbor had been bombed too.
Do you remember where you were and what you were thinking when you heard about that?
I was at home with a dad and mother. Dad couldn't read, but he loved that old
Radio?
6-battery radio that he had there, but we bought they always put out extra papers, you know, and sell them on the corner. We got one of them. Mom read it all to him, and he said, he didn't have too much to say about it, but he did say that he was reasonably sure that them Japs just now made a big mistake.
I'll be darned. So you were still in Kansas when it was bombed?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You hadn't come to Colorado
Yeah.
yet. Okay.
And I had got signed up at the draft board, but I told them I got some business in Colorado that I got to go see about. So they transferred me to Durango draft board. And it wasn't but a few days until the Durango draft board come for my shirt collar again.
Oh,
And
jeez.
they told me, you're not going to get out of it this time, you already moved once. Well, I told them, now fellas, I am not very old, not very smart, but I know you don't have no control really over me until the day I'm drafted. And I told this old boy, I said, if you don't think I'm going to leave Durango, you'll be down at the bus depot tonight about 11 o'clock and you will see me leave. I went back to Kansas, but when I got there and reported to the draft board, this was on Friday, and they told me Monday morning at 8 o'clock you'd be here with a toothbrush and a bar of soap because you're going in the Army.
Wow.
Well, I told them I'll be there. I'll be there. And I did. And I went in and they shipped me up to to Camp Funston, Kansas, which is just across the river from Fort Riley. And I was inducted there and spent a few days there, and then they shipped me to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for instruction for getting into service. And I was up there for 13 weeks. And then they shipped me from there to Camp Ibis, California, which is on the desert outside of Needles, about 15 miles, and had some desert training. So we figured all of us did, well, we're going over to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, when it come time to leave Ibis, we loaded on a train, 112 degrees there that day,
Oh, jeez.
in the middle of the day. And we went from there, we took all of our equipment with us, and we took this equipment down to Camp Maxey, Texas. Everybody was pretty healthy there in California because it was a high, dry heat, you know, the humidity was nothing. We got down to Texas, and the humidity was high, and in about 4 days, the majority of the company was, or the battalion was going for heat rash. Anywhere your clothes was close to your body broke out with a heat rash.
Yeah. Including yourself?
Yeah, including myself. And we went down there for field artillery training. I think the field artillery headquarters was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, but we went to Paris, Texas, and was there we was there until just before Christmas.
Christmas of what year?
It must have been 43.
43, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we went from there up to Camp Shanks, New York, and loaded on a ship at night there.
So now, at this point, you're already in a battalion, already in a group, a company by
Yeah,
now? Can you tell us what? Give us the
I was in the headquarters company of the 629 Tank Destroyer Battalion. There was a headquarters company, A, B, and C firing companies, and the recon companies, about 1,200, 1,300 men in the battalion. And we stayed in that was our little toy when we got to go into Germany. We still had this same tank outfit.
Wow.
Tank destroyers. But we went over to England.
Well, if you don't mind, let me back up and ask you a couple questions before we
Yeah.
take the crossing across. How was that transition going from civilian life into military life for you? Was that much of a transition for you, or
Not too much.
wasn't too bad?
Wasn't too much, except when that damn Crosby used to sing White Christmas and stuff like that. You put some tears in your eyes,
Yeah.
'cause, you know.
So if I'm correct, when we were talking earlier, you got married before
Yeah.
you went in. Did you meet your wife in Durango, or was this a Kansas girl, or
No, she was a Durango girl.
Durango?
And she stayed in Durango when I left. We were married, I guess, about 2 weeks.
Mm.
And when the time come to go, she stayed in Durango with her sister. And
Between the time you enlisted and before you shipped off to Europe, did you have any sort of furlough to get back to see her at all, or?
I had a 9-day furlough. Yeah, I had a 9-day furlough from California, and also one from Camp Maxey, Texas. So I got to go home a couple of different times.
How easy was that back then? Was that enough time to get home? And
Well, you spent a third of it anyway on a bus. Trains didn't run just everywhere you
Yeah,
needed
right,
to go.
right.
The buses did. So, yeah, it was a bit unhandy, all right.
oh boy,
But
Yeah.
we got back down to, my wife came and stayed with me down at Paris, Texas. We had an apartment in town, and we just get up in the morning and go out, just like having a job somewhere. But it didn't last very long.
Yeah.
13 weeks,
And,
out of there again.
and then she went back to Durango?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she went back. The next time I saw her was in 45.
Jeez. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So, getting back to your story then, so you guys are up in New York, and you load ships there to go,
Liverpool, England.
talk a little bit about that crossing. I mean, here's a landlocked boy from the Midwest. How was that ship crossing for you? Did you get your sea legs? How was...
I did pretty good, but I seen an awful lot of boys that got awfully seasick. We were on a World War I English ship called the Samaritan, and it was a troop. They used it to transport troops with in World War I. So it wasn't the latest up to date or anything, but it was decent. It was livable, and we were in a convoy. And when you stood on deck in the daytime, on the ocean, the ship you're on always looks like it's in a hole. The water's higher all the way around you. And you could see ships just as far as you could see every direction. A few years later, Tom Brokaw said it was the greatest armada ever assembled. The invasion was, but this was part of it. We're building up for the invasion now.
Any worries as you crossed as far as German U-boats?
We had you could be laying in your hammock at night and hear the motors on the ship shut off. And it was a submarine alert. But we never got fired on, nothing like that. But you laid there thinking, what the devil's going to blow the side of this thing out? All that seawater comes in here.
Did that play on your mind at all? Did you worry about that?
You got thought about it every once in a while. It was forever there. But then after we was out a day or two, you didn't dwell much on that kind of stuff. We had a young man, about the third day out, him and another fellow were boxing, a legitimate, had the gloves, and was just boxing. And this one guy just fell over dead. Well, at that time, they can only keep your body on a ship so many days. They had to bury it. So the captain, we had a lot of sick people, a lot of guys that were, a real good friend of mine he was sick, been thrown up, felt terrible, and the colonel said he wanted every man up on deck. Everyone, if you got to carry him up, carry him up. We carried this boy up, and he watched and buried this boy at sea. And they had to shoot. The coffin and the flag was set up here, and they did this little ceremony. And then somebody pulled a ripcord, and that casket zipped down off of there, and as it hit a certain place here, the flag was snapped off of it. And I must say that 90% of the guys that was carried up to witness this walked back down to their booth. They realized what was going on, and it did make it quite an impression. But it's the only sea burial I ever saw. And we did have another fella die of a heart attack before we got to Liverpool. It took us 9 days and nights to go up. We went right up the coast of Canada for quite a ways there, and then started cutting across towards Liverpool. And like I said, it took 9 days and nights to make that trip, and that's about not over a 2 or 3 day run now.
Yeah, yeah.
We didn't have that kind of movement then, but we never had no trouble with airplanes or submarines.
Oh, good.
I did see them drop depth charges in the daytime. One time, when you hear the engine shut off on a ship, there's an alert going. And one of the destroyers were right there, just our next ship over. And they were blowing these 55-gallon drums out in the ocean as they go down, they go off. But whether they done any damage, we never knew. But
Yeah.
after a while, we cranked up and went moving again. And it was, I should have told you about New York City. When we left out of New York Harbor, they had a flat top. I don't remember if it was the Roosevelt or which one it was now, but there was a flat top there, and they had bands. They had musical bands setting up on it, and another small boat that escorted us out of the harbor or escorted us in to get loaded, I guess. And it was really touching
Oh, bet.
music that they
Yeah.
were playing. But we made it through all right.
Yeah.
It took us all night long to load the ship, going 2 abreast of a catwalk. There was 15,000 of us, they said, on that
Wow.
particular ship,
Wow.
plus the crew.
Oh, wow.
Plus the crew, yeah. I know it was pretty crowded. You had hammocks swinging everywhere.
Wow. So you guys landed in Liverpool, you
Yeah,
said?
Liverpool.
Okay.
We come in there in Liverpool, and we didn't stay there. We immediately moved out to, I can't remember the first camp we had over there, but we had, they had barracks, Quonset hut barracks, and we stayed in that all winter, and it was all winter, and the fog was so bad that you had ropes that run down the sidewalk, different
Wow.
colored ropes that take you to different buildings.
Wow.
And it was quite something. We didn't have a whole lot to eat there in England either. They were kind of getting us ready for short rations, I guess, ahead. Another friend and I used to volunteer for kitchen duty a lot, just to be a guard there. Well, everything was pretty well locked up because they knew everybody was hungry. But anyway, they'd managed to leave a little something set out for you to make you want to be a guard again. And it was quite comical, but these colored ropes, one of them went to the mess hall. I think it was a white rope. And then they had red and green and black.
Jeez.
And you took that, or you watched it very closely. If you turned, you turned. And it would take you, one of them took us over to a daytime instruction class on machine guns and rifles and all that kind of stuff. And it was a long, lonely old winter. We got our coal from somewhere up there in England, and they were using some German prisoners in that coal mine. And every once in a while we also had briquettes. That's the kind of cold you got with
Uh-huh.
the briquette stuff. And every once in a while, one of them would go off and blow your old stovepipe down. Didn't hurt anything, but it made a lot of noise and a lot of sun. I never did hear of anybody getting hurt, except maybe to run over somebody else getting out of the way. But it wasn't day after day after day. This just happened once in a while, because I guess they did try to keep pretty good tabs on these, where that stuff was made. Briquettes, I think, are made out of coal dust, you know.
Okay.
They press it together. And that's what gives them a chance to put a little dynamite or whatever put in it. But it didn't. I never heard of anybody getting hurt.
With the cold dampness area, were you able to stay warm enough?
Oh, yeah. As long as everything worked, it was pretty good.
Okay,
It was
yeah.
fairly warm
Yeah.
and nice. But when you stepped outside that fog, you could stick your fist out in it and you could bring it back and look like it would leave a hole out there in it. It's so thick.
Wow.
I never saw fog like that before.
Huh.
But we managed to winter there. Long towards spring, we moved into it was shortly before the invasion started. We loaded up all of our equipment and everything, and we moved to a grove of trees that was about a quarter of a mile from Stonehenge, England. And Stonehenge is an old, ancient, I don't know what you call it, but anyway, they could tell time by that.
Yeah.
And they could tell what season it was, of where the sun was shining through this window at this time, and all that stuff. I never did understand it. It was interesting to go on
Oh, I'll bet,
around
yeah.
it. And we were there until 2 days, I believe, before the invasion.
When you say invasion, you're talking D-Day.
D-Day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
They come and loaded us all up, all your equipment loaded up, and then we'd go out on the road and we'd bivouac different places, you know. We played cat and mouse there for 3 or 4 days, and everybody figured it was the invasion that was coming, and sure enough it was. So they finally alerted us, we're going to load out tonight. You know, everybody was kind of happy for the simple reason that, you know, we'd been sitting there so long knowing nothing was happening and
Yeah.
never knowing when you're going to get to go back home.
Right, right.
But we had, when the invasion started, we were shouting with joy because we knew we was going to get to go home one way or the other, either in a box or
Oh, boy.
come back on the train. It was quite a attempt to do that channel at the very narrowest place. It's like 22 miles across, and where we crossed it was 26 miles. And we left England at a little after dark. Traveled all night across there and hit the beachhead over there the next morning, June the 6th. About daylight.
Mm.
But there was already lots of stuff going on before we got there.
Can you describe the scene as far as the Armada and just give us an idea what you were seeing that when daylight came?
There was ships, battleships, transport ships, LCIs and LCTs. The LCTs, they hauled tanks on. LCI was infantry. And we were all loaded on that kind of stuff. So when we got over, when it started to get daylight, the fight was going pretty heavy right there on shore because they had sunk piling steel, like not railroad irons, bigger than that. They had sunk them in to keep you from getting too close to shore.
Right.
Well, the engineers had to go in there and blow them out before we could get in. We thought there was an awful lot of bodies in the water when daylight came. And the majority of them that we saw were not our particular battalion, but they were American or British forces. And you had to sometimes move bodies out of the way so you didn't want to drive over regardless of what the land was. And before we left England, we had put cosmoline on our spark plugs, and all our electrical part of the truck was cosmoline with heavy grease so you could get it run underwater. And sure enough, those LCTs, when they drop the front end of it down, it's a ramp.
Mm-hmm.
And when you run off down in that sucker, the water was up here on your lap.
Wow.
I was driving, it was it's like I wrote in my diary, there was not so much confusion there. We just did what we was trained to do. You didn't have to have any orders to do this, and this, because you know your life and your buddy's life depended on you doing the right thing. But we had to stop those trucks shortly after you hit land because that cosmoline grease would cause the engine to get real hot.
Okay.
So we stopped over there and pulled it off.
Now, which beach did you land on?
Omaha.
Omaha? Oh, boy.
Yeah. Yeah, I landed on Omaha with the first, I believe it was the First Army. I think Bradley, I believe, was in charge of the First Army, and of course we just had a little segment here that was the First Armies, and the ones just over were English, and going the other way, they was different troops that were helping us. There was a lot of men in that landing, a lot of men, and they lost an awful lot of men that first hour of invasion there too.
What wave were you guys in? How much sooner after the
we
first?
were in the second wave.
Second wave.
The first wave had went in earlier. That was these engineers and to blow out that tank obstructions there. And if you ever saw this movie, Saving Private Ryan, it was about as close to actual thing as the actual thing was. My kids took me to it. They were just, well, we got to keep an eye on Dad now. You don't know what he's going to do. But it didn't bother me.
It didn't bring up memories or?
No.
Yeah.
You would get flashbacks of things that really did happen to you there.
Yeah.
But you also realize it was just a movie, you know.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, how was it? What's going for someone like myself that's never been in battle? What's going through your mind as you prepare to go the shore, knowing you're going into harm's way? What are you thinking?
Well, you are trained to not put your mind to what could happen to you, but you put your mind to living, taking care of yourself and taking care of your buddy. And you have already been trained and told how to do this, and it just comes automatically to you.
Wow.
There's nothing else that you can possibly do. that you're not already doing.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any. You soon get to where you don't put your mind to that stuff too much. You put your mind to what's going on, what's here for you, and it's a very good thing too. Some of the guys would break down when they got to where it was either him or you, and everybody wanted you to go back home, so there's only one thing to do, and you just did it. And I don't know, there's a blank in my memory. I thought that we had went to the first little town, it was named St. Lo, and there was a crossroads in the highway there, and this was all heavy timbered around there, heavy spruce or whatever trees they have there. And you know, when we got to that crossroads, that timber was all gone, and the Navy out in the had blown that stuff all out of it for us. Very good friends, them Navy boys. I would see a battleship crank his gun around here the way it's going to fire and he'd shoot broadside. So always shoot off the side. And that old ship would do this when them guns would go off. Of course, they were 20-inch guns. It was pretty good sized projector going out there.
Heard that was a hell of a sound too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the worst sound though I ever heard was the German 88.
Oh.
Was one of their best guns. And they had a ring. They had the projector, and then there was a ring that went around that projector. And that is what followed your lands and grooves out of the barrel. And as soon as it got out there, it would come off. And you talk about squealing and crying, it would scare the life out of it. If you could hear it though, you could realize maybe it didn't hit me. But it was, I was in the 629 Tank Destroyer Battalion, and a tank destroyer is just like a tank, only they have an open turret on top. We soon found out that you had to cover that because the Jerry's would pitch a hand grenade down in there, and their hand grenades were what we call potato bashers.
Yeah.
They wouldn't handle on them so long. And if you was quick enough and on your toes to grab that and throw it out, you was all right, but if you didn't, you was in a heap of trouble.
So you were in the thick of things where you were that close where they could lob a grenade in. Oh boy.
Yeah, they would throw that at them. And the infantry, down in Normandy, that country there is a little country that next to France, and they raise a lot of grapes and that kind of. The water is no good to drink down there. The natives all drink wine, and they told us that's what we need to do because the water was no good. But anyway, they had hedgerows. It would be a mound of dirt and run all the way around the field, and then there was trees planted right on top of that, and that's what we called hedgerows. And when the infantry would try to go over that, you hit the top, you didn't know if you was going to be looking right down the gun barrel or what, so it was too costly, losing too many men. They took the tanks. They didn't take them. They had the ordnance people come out and put some hedge cutters on the front of them.
Right.
They were probably a 6-inch channel that they welded right to the truck, but it was like fingers out there. And they'd punch a hole that's like a dozer right through that hedgerow, and they'd have the infantry would be riding on the back or at least walking behind the tank. And when he went through, well, they were in there where they could do their thing. And it was quite interesting. It was probably some of the scariest of all the combat. Of course, I was pretty new at it too, but later on I got to where the front line didn't bother me much. It was, oh, you could see the enemy down there and all that stuff, but it didn't, you found out after a while that those German boys that you were fighting were just guys like you and I, that Hitler had brainwashed into thinking they were a superpower, you know, and all that stuff, and that was not true. I remember the first prisoners that we took was a bunch of SS boys, and they were all big, long-headed, fearless guys. But you know, when they were looking down a machine gun barrel or a rifle barrel, they were just like anybody else. They put their hands up, and that was. We used to send them when we were moving. We had no way of taking care of them, so we just seen that they didn't have no guns or ammunition and start walking back the way we had come from. Only thing you could do.
Wow.
But over there at Malmedy, France, one time ammunition sergeant and I were in there just after daylight, and these Germans had like 100 and some of our boys prisoners, and they were kind of like we were. What it was costing them to take care of these guys, they had needed to be, you know. So what they did, they just lined them about their machine gun.
Right.
And the morning that Sergeant Lamb was, we went through there, they were all laying out there yet, but they had picked up, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 out of the bunch that was shot up, but they were dead.
Wow.
And they went in there with trucks and loaded them boys up and took them up to Graves Registration, where their dog tags and all that stuff was pulled off, and an officer had the privilege of writing to the next of kin, telling them about man so-and-so died so-and-so time, defending his country and all this stuff. Oh, there's a lot to that.
Yeah. So you guys from Normandy then started working your way up through France.
Yeah.
Were you part of the? Did you go through Paris or did you go around Paris or?
We were in Paris. I believe my diary says the 23rd of September. We had broken through and took Paris, and we had a parade there. And our bunch was in it, and these people had been under German thumb for quite some time, and they had one thing that looked kind of unusual is 5 or 6 women in this group that I saw were stripped off, bare naked. And they had a swastika painted on each one of their hips and a swastika on each one of their boobs. And their hair was all shaved off. And the people that were there said they were people that had been living with German officers during the occupation.
Wow.
I thought that was kind of a rude way to treat a human being, but that's, they trying to get even with them. The women probably had no choice.
Yeah.
They probably had no choice at all. But still, they were traitors amongst those people. They passed out cases and cases of cognac and wine, whichever you wanted. They had lots of it for you. the only thing, we just went right on through, you know, we didn't, the parade lasted that day, and then we was on our move, I believe, to what they call the Siegfried line.
Mm-hmm.
It was a concrete dragon's teeth sticking up. You know, you couldn't get through the tank, it'd rip you apart. So the dear old engineers come in there, and they had a cord, like that cord there. Just throw that cord around there and light it, and you'd cut that sucker off just like a hacksaw.
Huh.
Very, very effective. And but we did lose some tanks right there too, and that I was just reading my diary there last night, and I think we lost three tanks right there the very next morning. Germans caught them. We had one tank one night that two of the sergeants in the maintenance department volunteered. They're unloading their grocery truck there. They volunteered to go up this tank. This tank had been shot in the boogies that underneath the, you know, the boogies are what keeps your track with tension and rollers. And they went up there at night and put some new boogies on that tank, and they drove it out. Both of them got a presidential citation, I believe it was, for that, above and beyond the call of duty. But they dearly earned it. That didn't particularly, them guys didn't get hurt, but there was a lot of them that did, that, you know, were volunteering for that kind of stuff. And there was so much going on that you had plenty to do. You didn't sit around and worry about this and that, or I didn't anyway. I run off and jumped out and let the truck going one day. We were right on the front line. You could see the enemy down there, and ammunition sergeant and I were in my truck, and I had a full load of gasoline and ammunition for our destroyers down there. And lo and behold, here come a plane down through there strafing, and it had swastika or cross, you know, underneath it, German markings.
Right.
And when he finished strafing, he was coming right towards us. So I didn't ask any questions. I just kicked that old truck in neutral, and I bailed out, and the sergeant went the other way. And as that plane come up to us, he rolled over and had the U.S. markings all on the top of the wings. So we had to run and catch the old truck then. But we made them pretty scared the hell out of us. Because, you know, if a tracer or any kind of a shell would get
Right.
into a load of gasoline,
Oh boy, you're riding on a powder keg.
goodbye, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. So your responsibility, you were a driver?
Yeah.
Okay.
I drove for headquarters company.
Okay.
We serviced all these firing companies, recon companies.
Okay.
Yeah, we serviced them every day. Every day, sometimes twice a day, depending on what was going
So
on.
basically every day you were riding on a powder keg. You were full of ammunition and gasoline and,
yeah.
oh boy.
A supply truck, and we had to go back to a rear echelon depot to pick up this stuff. And it was this echelon, this ribbon, was run by a bunch of colored people. And we always made it a habit to see if we get there about noontime so we could eat. When they had good food, and all we had was these old C rations or A rations, a box of dry stuff or a can of beans.
Oh boy.
We go eat with them guys. They had good food, man. Good guys.
At that time the Army was segregated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they did. We never did have a colored guy in our outfit. But the Red Ball truck lines, it was a whole establishment of colored guys, and that's all it was delivery, supplies, bringing them from the coast on into distribution points wherever they were set up at. And it took us all. I tell you, it was not in particular anybody that won the war. It took everybody.
Oh, you bet.
To
Sure.
do it.
Sure. Well, how were conditions for you as far as sleeping conditions? You talked a little bit about the food. Were you properly clothed? How did that? How was that?
Well,
Overall, general. I mean, was there times when you guys got off the line for some R&R, or were you constantly on the go?
every day we were hauling to supply, but at night we would either sleep in your truck or under it or something like that. But the colonel, when they take over this town, they was a liaison officer, somebody would go find billeting for all the ranking people, but us non-coms, we had to stay in our own vehicle, which was all right. You get a little jealous, some guy sleeping in a bed with nice clean sheets, and there you are turning wood. But that's the difference in it. And they weren't brutal, we weren't mistreated, it was just, that's the Army rules. You don't build it in some place unless it's been secured by.
Yeah.
And it's probably a good thing because, these people couldn't have traps set around, dynamite around to blow you up at night. That would be a rude awakening, wouldn't it?
Well, one thing I've never quite understood, and maybe you can give some insight to this and how it was for you, but it seems like you had all these conditions against you. I mean, you weren't probably sleeping properly, you weren't eating properly, you were out in the elements all the time. That all with the fact that you're in the thick of war, in battle. How do you think you functioned during that period? I mean, any one of those by themselves, I think, would wear out a person. How do you think you kept going?
I think you have to kind of have a talk with yourself and tell yourself to be prepared for these things happening. If you see a chance to do something about it, well, you do it, like getting something extra to eat, like eating back with them back there boys and all stuff like that. But there was a lot of grumpy stuff going on all the time. And one night, another guy was on guard. Well, him and I were both on different posts, but we were guarding the motor pool. And this was in combat. And it was raining. Pretty soon we see this guy walking down through there. You could tell it was Lieutenant George, the way he walked. And he had a white bar on the back of his helmet indicating commissioned officer. And he walked right past us and went down there and cranked up a Jeep and drove it out. And lo and behold, the next morning after Reveille, he kept us there, and if he didn't chew us up one side and down the other kid that was on the other guard there by me, his name was Chandler, and he was from Alabama. And after this guy got through chewing on us, he asked him, or held up his hand, Lieutenant, what do you want? He said, can I say a little bit? Yeah, what do you want to say? And this kid told him, what I want to say is, Lieutenant, don't you ever come on my post anymore at night, because he said, what I'm going to do is put that rifle sight right on that stripe up the back of your helmet and pull the trigger. And he said, would you kill me? Very possible, this guy told me. If I was you, I wouldn't try stealing no Jeeps anymore. But but he was a kind of an ornery cuss, and he was only a second lieutenant. But you'd have thought he was a brigadier general. Oh, we had a lot of times that we'd get a good laugh. We had some sad times too.
Yeah.
You'd see your buddy laying there with his arm blowed off,
Oh,
or his
boy.
leg blowed off. I pulled into a group of people there one day, was going to service them, and there was a little short guy that was a medic. Of course, he had the big band on him, but just as I drove in this area, somebody hit him with what they call a burp gun. They had a machine gun. It was just a burp, and there was 20 shells or so in the air there. And they hit him 14 times, his arms and legs, in his sides. And that little fella walked right on up to the Jeep, crawled up there and laid down on the litter and told the driver, let's go. Took him to hospital, and we never did know if he lived or not, because it took him for quite some time to get back to normal again, and we were long gone by then.
Yeah.
It's you get acquainted and you get familiarized with these 1,200 men in this battalion. I knew a little bit about the majority of them, and I knew every one of them. Couldn't call them by name, but I knew them.
Huh.
And it was, and I suppose there was other guys that way too. You just become a team.
Yeah, yeah.
And hope that everybody is doing his part as he's supposed to be. I know I was servicing B Company up there one time just before the Battle of the Bulge, and I pulled in there, and I had almost a whole load of gasoline. Those tanks at that time burned gasoline, or the next ones went to diesel when we got new ones. But anyway, I pulled in there, and it was right on the front line. You could see the Germans down below us there. And so I was servicing this truck, and some tank commander, he didn't have no choice. There was a German tank popped up right there in front of us, and it was either going to be him or us, so the commander just knocked him out. But when he did, the concussion from the gun knocked me off the top of that load of ammunition and stuff. And this ear just felt like water running down. Busted, wiped out the eardrum, I guess. They gathered me up and took me down to a field hospital there where they shined the flashlight in one ear and the flashlight in the other ear and said, ain't nothing we can do for you. It's sitting back up on the line. And I never did anything about that. I never put in for any compensation or nothing until 60 years later. I got to thinking about that, and I have a diary that told right when it happened and everything. And I applied for it, and by golly, I got it.
I'll be darned.
It was sure welcome.
Well, I noticed looking at your medals, you weren't awarded the Purple Heart for that?
No, never did get a Purple Heart. My brother got 2 of them.
Huh.
I think there's 5 other medals that's supposed to be in there that, you know, I got all the medals that I had come at the time of my discharge. But since then, they have okayed several different medals that are not on there. And I asked the girls down at the courthouse about it. They used to give me the address to write to, and I wrote to them, And I got a letter back and said you were awarded all your eligible medals when you were discharged. That's true.
Huh.
So that's the way it went.
Wow. So after going down the field hospital, you just went back to work and.
Back to work. Yeah.
Wow.
Back
Jeez.
to work. All I had was just a ringing in my ears. Still rings.
Wow.
Still. They get. Over the years, I've developed different things, and it's connected back to the service. And right now, I'm happy to say that I'm 100% combat service-connected disability,
Wow.
which is great.
Wow.
I was 60-some years ever doing anything about it.
Oh,
but
wow.
They made up for it.
Yeah.
I still love our old country. I'm proud of what I did,
Wow.
what I was able to participate in,
Yeah.
and all that good stuff. And I have a grandson down here in Colorado Springs. That's a sergeant down there. He's been in combat over there 4 different times.
How do you feel about that as far as a grandfather who's been through that? How do you see that from your perspective?
I'm proud as the devil of him, but I realize that he's fighting an altogether different kind of war than what we had.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to Washington the 11th of next month, and he's going to be my escort.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, he wants to be my escort, so
Very good.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, let's move ahead with your story then. You guys got into the Battle of the Bulge. Now, from what I understand, that was one of the coldest winters Europe had ever gone through. What was that like?
It was terrible. It was cold. But you usually, everything you had in the way of clothing was wool. And I didn't suffer too much from the cold, but then that's not to say a lot of them didn't, because a lot of those infantry riflemen and people like that were living there in that snow, walking in that snow, laying in it. It was, the damn mud got terrible. The mud got running more deep on your truck. And you couldn't hardly afford to drive anywhere except for the ruts were because of the mines.
Wow.
So you drove through it. And it was a long, hard winter, I'll tell you. And we were back in Liège, Belgium. The sergeant and I was one time to pick up a load of supplies. And we were about 300 miles from the front. And we got to stay all night there in Liège. Got to sleep in good white sheets and a soft bed. And that young Germans that night, they decided they was going to fly buzz bombs in there.
Oh, jeez.
These buzz bombs were hitting that town all night long. We finally got a little sleep all right, but you never knew if you was going to wake up or not. But
Wow.
you get so tired you'll sleep. I wonder if we could stop for a minute. Start me off.
Yeah, we left off, you went back for supplies, and that's when the buzz bombs were giving you trouble.
Yeah, a buzz bomb was a self-propelled explosive that was, they put just enough fuel in it to run it where they wanted it to go, and then she'd go right down. A lot of them, they used a lot of them.
So what I understand, the scariest part was when you heard that engine stop, is when it went silent is when you knew that.
You put your arms over your head, and it never did have one hit close to me. I was under a tank one night when they were hitting all around us, but the best place I could find to go was under this old Sherman tank sitting there, and I jumped under there and I skinned my head up, and there was 5 other guys already under there. And those buzz bombs were shutting off and going down, but they weren't close to, not real close to us. You could hear them quite a little ways coming, and they made quite a noise when they went off. And we broke out up there. I forget the name of the town now, but we broke through the German lines, and we were in Belgium, I believe. And up in that sector of their war, they had some of their older stuff, you know, like horse-drawn artillery and stuff like that. And I know I went down this road one day going into service of tanks, and they had just strafed the road, and there was all kinds of dead horses laying out there with them old towed guns, and those poor people were out there with butcher knives cutting them horses up, cutting them steaks out of the back and all that stuff. They hadn't had any meat because of the occupation. You know, all that went to the boys, and I felt so damn sorry for them people. But I guess horse meat's been ate before. I hope I'll never have ate any of it. Anyway, we broke through there, and when we got going, why, the Battle of the Bulge, I think, was behind us then. Now this was more along towards spring. It was behind us. It was at Christmas time, if I remember right, the Bulge.
Right,
And what happened there, the Germans had quite a group of American troops cut off. And he offered the commander to surrender, or you want to die one at a time, we can do that too. And this commander, I forget what his name was, he said, nuts.
Yeah.
We got out. They only had us cut off for probably not even 24 hours. We was cut off all night. I had to spend the night right there on the front with the tank because I didn't know other place to go. And I think we were only cut off that night and a little maybe in the morning, but then we got relief troops in there that put the Germans on the run again. And when that ended, it seemed like the German resistance crumbled pretty fast. We made one run there one night advancing, and we drove until we advanced until it must have been midnight, and we just bivouacked right along the road. Got up the next morning, and there were 16 German prisoners standing out there with their hands up. I'll never forget that. They could have killed every one of us, you know, but they wanted out of there as bad as we did. And they were all standing out there, comrade, so we took all their guns away from them and ammunition and just sent them back down the road because we had no way of taking care of them. Just sent them on back, and the next MPs or whoever who come along would pick them up, take them on in. But like I said, them boys had had enough of it, just like we had. They were
Right.
was pathetic. And Hitler, he got killed about that time, I think. Not maybe a little later on in the spring, but didn't he get killed in
He
his?
killed himself towards the end of April, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Roosevelt died in April,
Right.
and the war ended in May. I often thought it was too bad
He didn't.
Franklin
Yeah.
wasn't around to see that thing end.
So by this time, you guys had advanced into Germany, then,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
Yeah, we were in Germany, heading towards Berlin, but I never did get to Berlin. They shut us off. Well, I think it was the Third Army. I think Patton, he would have went to Berlin a long time ago if he'd just had the supplies. That booger, Harry Truman had to tell him that he could be replaced. He wasn't paying no attention to anybody else. He'd come, and if we had extra gas, he'd take our gas to get his tanks to go on, to keep going. He wanted to get Berlin. He had a lot of ideas, old George did.
So you guys got shot off just short of Berlin then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we got the war ended. The sergeant and I had been back and picked up a load of ammunition and gas and was going back to the company. And along them roads where it was crossroads, stuff like that, they always had MPs around there. And they flagged us down. And I told this ammunition sergeant, what the hell do you suppose they want? Well, he said, I don't know, let's see. He boy come up to the door and he said, do you boys know the war has ended?
Wow.
No, you gotta be kidding.
Wow.
No, he said, it's over. Stop fighting. Well, I told him, I hope them Germans know that.
Wow.
But it really had ended then.
Do you remember what you were feeling? That, boy, I
Oh,
made it through this
great.
thing and...
I've got through this and I feel like I'm gonna go home and see that boy, see what he looks like.
Wow.
And by golly, that was in May, and I didn't get to leave over there. When they started shipping guys home, they had to have 85 points
Right.
or better,
Uh-huh.
and some of them had 200. Some guys had been in there, cadre. But anyway, I had 84.
Oh.
1 point. So I got to stay until, well, I got discharged, I think, November the 29th. I believe that's what it says on the paper, either October or November. But it wasn't too hard to wait after it ended.
So you didn't get home until October, the following October, did you say?
Yeah.
So you became part of the occupation forces there?
Occupation troops, yeah. Occupation troops in a little old town with the name of Gmunden, Germany. Kind of a neat little old place. I had been before it got all shot to heck. But anyway, we bivouacked. Oh, we had some billeting then. We stayed in some beds then. And we were going to be there. We didn't know how long. And they told us, you weren't supposed to fraternize
Right.
with these people. So, but up on the hill, about a half a mile from the house, was a big motel-type building. And it was full of displaced persons. Women, men, children, all that stuff. And I don't know who went up there and checked it out, but the word got out that there was a lot of women up there. And the captain told us, now you boys, you know you're not supposed to fraternize, and I don't want to get you any of you stepping over the line. So one evening, just right after dark, the moon was kind of shining a little bit, and my buddy and I decided we'd go up and see what was going on. I stumbled over somebody's leg. He was laying on a blanket there on the ground, and I stumbled over his leg, and he rolled over to tell me, where you going? And his captain bars was just the next morning at Reveille, he brought this up again, this fraternizing business. You know, he said, you're not supposed to do that. And he said, I've got word that there is something going on up there. And after he gave us a fallout, I went over there by him and I said, Captain, I'm sorry as hell I stepped on your leg last night. He said, is that you awkward supper other he called me. Yeah, it wasn't too bad once the war ended. You know, when you were just occupation troops, they used us to move displaced people, shuffle them from one camp to another, and all that kind of stuff, and get prepared for the occupation troops. I don't know how long well, I suppose it was there for no telling how long.
Yeah.
Getting everything back in order again.
Of course, then you said you were there till October, so almost a good 6 months after the war ended. Yeah.
Yeah, they kept us in there as occupation troops, but I kind of enjoyed it because there was no fighting going on and all that good stuff. Mostly what we were doing was destroying stockpiles of ammunition stuff they had. We got, Sergeant and I took a load over there one day, supposed to take it to a place where they destroyed it. And I told him, why do we have to take it from over there? How come we can't just pile it up down here and take it? I had a 50 caliber ring mount machine gun on my truck. I said, I can set that stuff off. Okay, he said, if you think it'll be all right. I told him, well, you're the sergeant. I said, let's try it. We unloaded it down there in a pile and got that old truck back about 1,000 yards, you know, and turned that 50 loose on it. And you know, you could see those hand grenades just bouncing in the air. We had to go down there and load that stuff up again and take it off. None of it go off. None of it. I told him, well, we didn't get the shortcut this time. We were dumping it in the river. I forget what river it was now. It wasn't the Rhine. But anyway, that's where we were dumping it. And I don't know, time went pretty fast, seemed like. After they shipped us down, eventually down to Marseille, France. That was a deportation place. And I had just gotten a letter from my oldest brother, and that's where he was at.
Oh, wow.
So we got down there, and I got permission to go to the headquarters, and I hightailed it over there. And they pulled up the files and stuff and said, yes, sir, he sure was here, but he shipped out the day before yesterday.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, poor guy. And, you know, they loaded him up on a ship. He said not to talk. Well, anyway, they loaded him up on a ship and shipped him all the way to the Pacific out there where they had the typhoon at the time. They was trying to get that one settled. And he never did unload. He stayed on the ship all that time. And they turned right around and shipped him back to San Francisco. He's on the ship 30-some days.
Oh, boy. Now, was there ever any talk of you guys going over to the Pacific Theater at all, or
No,
no?
no, I never did have any talk of that I know of. The officers that we had were some of them pretty good Joes, you know. And I asked this one captain one time, I suppose we're going to go over now and fight them little boogers over there? And he said, no, I don't think so. You got too many points. He said, they wouldn't, I don't think, he said they would ship you over there. And sure enough, he was right. But we did, after the war ended, I got to be his driver, but he was a kind of an honored booger. And the guys didn't like him. But you know, I always got along good with him. So the first sergeant had us lined up one morning out there in the woods, and he said, I need a volunteer. And he said, I want you to think about it now. He said, Captain Caden needs a driver. Nobody wants a driver here. And finally I asked old Sarge, I said, what does this involve? And he said, he said, you're exempt from everything here in camp. He said, you don't have no KP, no guard duty, no, I'll take it, I don't. You know, it turned out to be a great working relationship.
Is that right?
Yeah, it did. We went down to Birch's Garden one time.
Wow.
And him and another captain, and then we went by what was the name of that big hospital? Anyway, they had a couple of nurse friends that worked out there, and so I went and picked them up, and we all went down there. Well, when we got there, they had a flight of stairs for the enlisted guys to walk, and the commissioned people got to ride the elevator. So this little old Mary, that was Captain Caden's girlfriend, she told me, she said, you just stick with me, I'll see that you get on the elevator. And we started to get on there, and the guy said, what about this guy? She said, that's my escort, you lay off of him. We just kept walking. Got in there, went right on there, no problem at all.
Huh.
Saved a lot of walking. But he had, Adolf had a great big plate glass window there in the room where he sat, watched out all over
Wow.
Bolivia. And, oh, it was a fantastic place.
Wow.
Beautiful chandeliers and stuff like that. But that's one place that they didn't shoot up. They intended to save it. Not because, well, he left there.
Yeah.
That's the reason they didn't have no fighting there. But they had a lot of things to see if you went down there. First place I ever saw an electric ship. Pretty good sized ship on this. There's a lake right there by Birch's Garden. And we took a ride on it, and it was just as silent, you know. It was an electric ship. Quite a fancy outfit. But like we got on one, this is at a different time, but up here in Alaska we got on one, and it had two pilots, one in the front and one in the back. You'd watch that ship, he'd be going this way, and then he'd go this way, or he'd go over here, going around the icebergs.
Right. Okay.
That was, but I had rode that other one, and this one up here was a much nicer outfit, all right, but yeah.
It must have been something. Here was, you know, you're a farm boy from Kansas or from the Midwest, had really only traveled between Kansas and Colorado, hadn't traveled all that much, and here you were on the West Coast, the East Coast, all through Europe. That must have been something else to experience.
It was quite a, that's why I've always said I'm real proud of my my service, it's quite a education for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's so far, it's stayed, my memory's been pretty good. Except things that happened last week or yesterday or something, I forget. But outside of that, pretty good.
Describe for us some of the sights you'd see. You followed the front line all the way to the end of the battle. A lot of damage, a lot of villages destroyed, and give us an idea of what you were seeing there.
They tried to not, unless the Germans put up a big resistance, they tried to spare the towns. But if the Germans decided to stay and fight, there was nothing to do but shoot it down around them.
Yeah.
And I was in one little town that had been a town probably, I don't know how many thousand, not too many, not too big, 1,200 maybe or something like that. But it had a beautiful Catholic church there. And when the fighting ended, it's the only building that I could see that wasn't shot up.
Wow.
And they had these slate shingles on most of the roofs over there. Prominent roof, I guess, to last forever. And we pulled in this one little old town and was doing indirect fire, but we wasn't getting the job done. So they moved in 2 155 rifles in there one night, camouflaged them all over. And there was a railroad, Germans had a railroad gun way back there on the mountain. And that sucker would come out at night and shell the hell out of us. And they set up these 2 155 rifles. And that old boy made a showing that night. He got his lights put out. That old 155, when it goes off, it's quite a concussion all around you. And you could hear those slate shingles coming down off the roof. Wow. The concussion, you know. But fortunately, they didn't have to fire him very many times till they got that old boy. Put his light out. He had some kind of infrared or something or other that would pick him up. And when they picked him up, they nailed him. But it was devastating to the little town.
Yeah. What was you followed the front lines all the way through Europe. Was there any time or times where you were in situations where you wondered, boy, I'm not sure I'm going to get out of this? So was it, or did you ever? Well,
I've been pretty close call a few times. That one time that we bailed out of the plane, or out of the truck and run, of course that was a friendly fire job. But another time down there, I was sitting backed under a tree, and down there in the valley was this German Spitfire, just shelling the hell out of them down there, machine gunning them. And so I thought, well, old boy, if you come up this way, I'm going to give you something to think about. And I got up and I loaded that old 50 caliber, and pretty soon, here he comes.
Oh.
But you know, I was more or less facing right into him, and I could not traverse that gun fast enough. He just shooed right all over me. Never touched him. But I threw a lot of fire in the air down there.
Wow.
Never touched him. I couldn't traverse. You got to shoot ahead of something that's going that fast. You got to shoot ahead of him, and he'll fly into it.
Yeah.
One night they were bombing ammunition dump. The Germans were. We were right in the woods around it, ammunition dump. But we were not supposed to fire or anything like that because you give your position away.
Right, okay.
And I was sitting down there watching these guys. They dropped white phosphorus fires in the air first to light the place all up. And then they'd come in, they'd bomb the hell out of that dump, and then they'd bank right back over me, our company. I couldn't stand that. I had that old 50, and every fifth shell in it was tracer, so you could tell who you was hitting. I got into them boys, and you know them old bombers can carry an awful load unless you hit a hydraulic line or something like that. And I could see them tracers bouncing off of that plane. And about that time, somebody grabbed me by the leg and jerked me out of there, and it was the captain. I told him, "What's up?" He said, "Harold, you had better get hid," because he said the colonel was on his way down here to see who's shooting.
Uh-oh.
Well, I told him, "I ain't seen nobody shooting around here myself." He said, "Get lost." He said, we want, you're a good man, we want to keep you. Old Colonel never did come down. But hell, all he had to done was feel the gun barrel. You could tell who was shooting.
Yeah.
He never did come down. Maybe the captain satisfied him, but anyway, I told the captain I thought that's what we were over here for, to fight these Germans. He said, "That's exactly right," but he said, "Not on an individual basis." Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the home front. How was communications back and forth between, say, your wife, some of your siblings, or your father? Were you getting mail? I mean, because you guys are all constantly on the move.
We got mail probably about every 3 days.
Oh, okay.
If we were stopped somewhere, you'd get it almost every day. But if you were on the move about every 3 days, it would catch up with you. And that's when I got a letter from her, and she said that my boy had been born.
Oh boy! Wow.
Told me what his name was and all that good stuff, and I was quite happy. My sister used to write to me a lot too, and she got to where she would always telling you about what somebody else was doing, and and running around, all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I wrote her back, and as soon as I finished that letter, I sat down and wrote her one, and I told her, "Sis, if you don't have anything to write to me but somebody else's troubles, don't write me anymore." I said, "I got enough trouble over here myself." She did write, but she didn't write about other people so much. Yeah, it was pretty good.
It must have been tough being over there, particularly with a new baby born and missing your wife. That had to be hard to deal with at times, I'm sure. Holidays and.
It was. And I came back into what did I say it is? 11. That's all right. I got a letter from her, and she said that he had been born, and on August 17th, and I think I got the letter the 21st or something like that. I think I still have it somewhere. I've kept some old stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was awfully good to get to come back.
Yeah. So you came back in October.
Yeah.
Left France. Back to New York? Is that where you landed?
Yeah, landed in New York City, and the USS Missouri was sitting there, and there was a big flat top. I don't remember what it was, but they're huge, huge ships. And there again, a band met us out in the harbor and escorted us in, and you was treated like royalty from there on.
Wow. That must have been a great feeling coming in and seeing the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
And, oh boy.
That when we went to get discharged, they had 2 lines of people there. And the sergeant told us, he said, "If you stay in this line right here, you'll get discharged today. If you get in that line over there, that line is for complaints, or if you want to put in for any compensation or anything. That's where you do it. But he said, I'm going to tell you the truth. You're going to be here from 2 to 4 days longer over there in that line. No, I was only 60 miles from that boy.
Oh, boy.
For Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, Fort Riley. So I stayed in that line. That's why I never put in for nothing until 60 years later.
Just wanted to get home, huh?
Come home, went to work.
Remember the day you got home and saw your wife and your baby for the first time, the homecoming, what that was like for you?
Yeah, it was kind of tear-jerking. Kind of tear-jerking. Kind of, I can't explain it, but it was an awful good feeling.
Oh, I'll bet.
Awfully good feeling. And to see my dear old dad, too. He was kind of feeble at the time, and poor old guy. My other brothers that was in the service, all 3 of them were home. I was the last one to get home, the first one to leave. I told them there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
But it was all, we had, I think all the boys that I know, my brothers anyway, never held too much against the Army or against Germany or nothing. It was just something that had to happen.
Yeah.
And the president asked you to go, you didn't say, I'll go to Canada rather than do that.
Yeah.
You just automatically went because it was your duty.
Yeah.
And the man had asked you to be a candidate here.
Did your father or your wife ever talk about what they were feeling while you were gone? Because they probably didn't know where you were, or and such. Was there ever any discussion about the feelings, particularly with your dad, with all you boys off to war? And
Dad must have been under pressure continuously because, like I said, there was 4 of us. The youngest boy, he had rheumatic fever, and when he went to the induction center, he took a letter from the doctor stating that he had this and what his after effects were. And the guy at the captain there that was inducing him rolled it up and throwed it in a trash bag, and he said, we get that kind of stuff all the time. But it was he did my brother a great favor, because he took him in and they shipped him down to somewhere in Florida, into a hospital down there. And you know, he stayed there, maybe not in the hospital, but there in that area, all that, until they discharged him. And when they discharged him with a little disability pension, and he could use the VA, like the hospital or whatever. Done him a favor, But he died young. He was only 57 when
wow.
passed away.
And how about yourself? Now you're back home. How was that transition after all you'd been through in the military? How was that transition going from that back to civilian life? Was that much of a?
It wasn't much of a struggle. I loafed for a while. Well, I drew. The government at that time would pay you $20 a week for 52 weeks.
The 2250 Club?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I drew that a while, but I went to work pretty quick. I didn't loaf around. I went to work there at Fort Lyon VA Hospital. I had put in to go to work at the steel mill in Pueblo. Went over and took my physical and everything on a Friday. I was to go to work Monday morning, and they went on strike Monday morning.
Oh, boy.
Never did go to work there. I went down to Fort Lyon, went to work, stayed there 15 years. And then I decided, well, this is a good job. It's a good, steady job. Don't pay nothing, but think I'll look for something else. Another guy and I went to Monte Vista with our families and put in a Westinghouse laundromat over there because there wasn't one in the country. And that was an interesting job, an interesting thing. We bought this old building that was being used for storage from an outfit up in Denver, and they wanted to sell it. So we give them an offer on it, and they took it. Lord, we had all kinds of work to do. Him and I were both fair carpenters, and we worked on that son of a gun until we got it ready to open it on my daughter's birthday, February the 15th. Had a big crowd, gave away a lot of donuts, and it went over all right. It went just fine. We ran it, the girls did for, I don't know, must have been 10 years or
Is that right?
better. And then we decided, well, let's try something else for a while. So when I was working for the highway department then, I had went to work before I didn't. He went to work before the place was open. I went ahead and finished it up, and we had our opening. And then I had already been down and talked to the boss down at the department down there. He said, you go to work anytime that you're available. I told him I'll be available. It's a short time now. And you know, I called him last week and talked to him. Been 33 years since I left there.
Is that right? How long did you work there?
I worked there 15 years again. I seem to be 15's about all I could.
Yeah.
You know, we decided to, big mistake, decided to move to California. Big mistake. I should have knew better, but I didn't. I had a job already waiting for me out there in the Mint. Press operator, die setter, and went out there, and yeah, it was not for me. There were so many people everywhere you go. So many people, and I'm no farm boy. I didn't have that. But when I come back from there, instead of going back to the valley, my boy was in school at CSU, so we came here, and lo and behold, I got a job at the university.
Oh, good.
I worked there for, I think, 15 years. And my folks have all seemed like they died kind of young. One of my brothers was 47, the other was 57, and the oldest one turned 60 in October and died in April.
Huh.
Heart problems,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So I told my wife, when I get to be 62, baby, I'm getting out of here. She worked over there too, and so she was too young to retire, so she just quit. And we had quite a few years of real happiness, you know. We had a boat, we had a nice overhead camper,
Oh, nice.
and we just go where we wanted, when we wanted, stay as long as we wanted.
Yeah.
It was a great time. And then we got up, she did one Thanksgiving morning, and bedroom was in the back of the house, pickup and camper parked in front. She come back and she said, I don't think your camper's out in front. What? Jumped up, and sure enough it was gone. Called the cops down, and lieutenant come down there. And I told him all about it, and he said, well, I hate to tell you this, but he said, it's very, very doubtful if you'll ever find it.
Hmm.
He said, if it's it could be halfway to Old Mexico by now, or he said it could be right over here in Greeley. They've got it all chopped up and selling the parts. I told him, you guys know so damn much about this. How come you don't do something about it? And he said, tell me how we could do it. I told him, I don't know, but you guys are the cops. No, he said, we've been trying, we've tried. There was 4 other pickups stole here in town that same night.
Wow.
And he said one of them belonged to one of the city boys. And he said it just, if mine was an older pickup, it was a 77 Ford 3/4 ton with a 4-speed transmission in it. It's just what they wanted, he said. Take them older trucks, they're worth a lot of money to get them down to Mexico or somewhere. Damn, I hated it. That was a sad situation.
They never did find it then, huh? Mm-hmm. I'll be darned.
No. Did somebody knocking?
No. No. Well, we'll start to wind down this interview. How many years were you and your wife married?
I believe the kid said 32. That was my second wife.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
The first one, that didn't turn out too good.
Yeah.
We had moved to California for that 1 year, and come time to leave, she wouldn't go with us.
Yeah.
But the other one, we'd had about 33 years, 32. She died with cancer. What a sad situation. But we made it. I couldn't hope for her to live any longer because she was incurable cancer.
Right, yeah.
I talked to her doctor one day after I asked her if she'd leave so I could talk to him. And when she left, I asked him, Doc, how's things going with Jeanette? Oh, he said, we're losing her.
Oh.
Well, I told him I'm not surprised. I just needed to hear you say that.
Yeah.
And I said, I really can't hope for her to live any longer because of the shape she's in.
Yeah.
Well, he said, we'll make her as comfortable as we can, as long as we can. But she didn't last too long. Thank God. And I still lived in the little old house for, oh gosh, I just left there a year ago last May. And one of the hardest things I ever did in my life, I had a carpenter shop there in the back, and I had something on every nail in there. Had plenty of tools, had a good place to work, I loved it. But it got to where Father Times got to catching up with me, and the kids were worried about me falling.
Yeah.
So I had to give that up, and when I moved out here, I had to give up my driving. I asked Julie down here, she said you won't be able to drive any longer. And I told her, who are you to tell me I can or can't drive? So I said, I got a driver's license good for 2 years yet. But she said, Harold, I won't give you a permit for a parking place out here. Well, I told her, you're no fun, I can tell that. So that's our situation.
Yeah. Well, we'll wind down this interview. One question I always like to ask is your war experience, the time in the service. How do you think that changed your life, affected your life, played into your life, or was it just simply just a chapter of your life that you went through, do you think?
Well, I think that it was just a chapter of life, but I think there's a lot of things that wore off on you that you did still carry certain things. But like you said, you couldn't you know, you were back and it was over with. You got a family to raise, and you just move on. No problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's been a good life. I've enjoyed it, still enjoy it.
Well, is there any closing statement you would like to make to friends and family and others that will watch this someday, or not? Anything you'd like to cap off this interview by saying?
Well, I don't know what it would be. I'm very proud of the fact that I was a military, had some military service. I think it done me a lot of good, and I think it made a believer out of me. And I hope that anybody who might see this or have anything to do with it is that I have no hard feelings at the government or at anybody that I had to serve. It was a privilege. I was real thankful it turned out like it did.
Yeah.
Real thankful.
Well, Harold, I want to thank you for sitting down to tell your story today, but more importantly, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you. You're more than welcome, my friend.